friends. I'm Scott Hanselman. It's another episode of Hanselminutes. Today, I'm talking with Roderick Rabah. He's the head of product at Postman Flows. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks for having me on. Really excited for this.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. You know, you have done a bunch of work in the cloud since the cloud's been around. I'm curious, when you were working as a research scientist, did you see the cloud coming? Did you see serverless coming, or did it happen and then you jumped on board?
It was sort of happening, and you realized this was a big thing and jumped on board. Definitely did not. I moved into cloud. I was working on compilers, runtime systems, building software for FPGAs, basically programmable hardware. And my foray into cloud started with Amazon Lambda. When it came on, it basically gave us the vocabulary for how to present and tell the story around what we were doing, around high-level synthesis for hardware. And started working in cloud, and off I went and never looked back in a way. I think I've been on a mission to build a cloud for Rodric ever since.
Yeah, build the Roderick cloud. It feels like, and this is an analysis of your career and the research that I've done, that you've been looking for the right layer of abstraction for people to work at. I mean, you pioneered serverless computing when you worked on OpenWhisk at IBM. You founded a serverless cloud company. Serverless is where you think about servers less. And now you're working on this AI to API paradigm shift. It seems like you're hunting for the right layer of abstraction for the business user to get work done, for the developer to get work done. Is that a fair analysis?
I think that's a really good analysis and a good way of looking at essentially my own personal mission. I still build. I build all the time, and in a way that puts me in touch with the technology that not only our users on Postman Flows use, but in general, what engineers are dealing with. And the power and the intersection of APIs and AI today is really transformative. I've seen it firsthand. I think my first interaction between APIs and AI was like when I first connected an API to a large language model, Claude, actually. I was like, oh my God. I was like, more APIs. I need to just give it more APIs. But I think hunting for the right abstraction is a really good way of putting it. I started in hardware and basically just building compilers, which is the lowest level of abstraction. And increasingly you've been going up the level, the stack. Because at the end of the day, as builders, engineers, today's definition of a builder is very broad. Anybody who has an idea and access to, Claude, ChatGPT, et cetera, could build. So how do you make them efficient? How do you make them capable of realizing what's in their head and actually materializing it? And increasingly, it's sort of the power of APIs and AI really brings it to the fore for me.
Yeah. I think that people right now are hearing the word agents. If you want to feel smart in a meeting, you say agentic multiple times. It's a very kind of erudite, very kind of academic word. People love to say agentic and then feel smart. But ultimately, tool calling is what we're talking about. And for APIs, we're tool calling into some amazing backend. It feels like Postman really did a brilliant kind of, not even a pivot. I mean, they just kind of like stepped in and said, hey, we're the API company. I thought that was very clever because I've been using REST. I did SOAP, I did Corba, I did DCOM. Like we've always been trying to figure out what the right level of distributed API is. It seems like Postman Flows is an acknowledgement that, hey, we have all these APIs. Those are just tool calls. We could plug the whole world into agents and into LLMs and look what kind of cool stuff we can do.
Oh, absolutely. I think the irony here is we're inventing new terms, which maybe confuses people or maybe simplifies for new builders. Like you say API, maybe it might scare somebody off who's not a typical developer. You say tools, like, okay, tool helps me get the job done. And I think what's intriguing with AI today, and largely we're talking largely about large language models here, which have a profound capability of understanding our written language. Is that you give it these tools to essentially accomplish tasks for you. Otherwise, you're just having a text in, text out conversation with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever is your Gemini, another tool that I use. Actually, got my kids using it. I vibe coded a game the other day. It was very interesting to just see my 11-year-old son, my 14-year-old son both created different games. We're like, wait, you had to write all this code by hand? And it would have taken you how long? And we just did it in 10 minutes. But anyway, getting back to the point, um, when you're building these applications, you realize I need a way of translating my idea, which I do with natural language. The LLM can understand it, and then to actually affect change in the world, to send a message, to take a payment, to render something on a screen. All of that happens with APIs or tools in common parlance. And so for Postman, you're calling it clever. It was kind of like we're already here. Like this is where all the world's APIs are. Over 100,000 APIs are on Postman today in terms of our Postman API network. Every one of those APIs is a tool you can attach to your AI. And I think when you start building, it's like you give it one API, one tool. It's like, great. Oh my God, it can do so much. More tools. Give it more tools and hence more APIs. And I think that's been the transformation, not just for me personally when I started building with this, but in general, why there's so much excitement in the space with artificial intelligence today. Tools, why MCP became so popular is because it just made it easier for you to connect your APIs to your LLM and just unlock massive capabilities.
To ask a somewhat challenging question and kind of like bring us down from like I get where the future is, I get where the goal is, but I have also found LLMs attached to tools, attached to MCP servers, because no one's really figured out how to write a great MCP server. One might ship one and it's got 2 tools. Another one might ship an MCP server and it's got 85 tools, and now it's used up all my available tooling space. It feels like someone taking a screwdriver and shoving like a Phillips screwdriver into a square head and then shoving a square head into a Phillips. If someone were to plug an LLM into a Postman API, some of those are destructive APIs. Like fumbling around in the dark, poking things with screwdrivers might work with a local LLM and a local series of tools, but one could charge a credit card or make a mistake.
Absolutely.
Doesn't the altitude of our APIs and how we think about their behaviors make an even bigger difference than before if the LLM could be fumbling around in the dark with the tool?
Oh, absolutely. I love the fumbling in the dark analogy. Like everybody has a toolbox where there's like 1,000 tools in, or maybe a dozen tools in there. And, it's just where you just keep throwing stuff. And so you have a job to do, you go reach for it. Maybe you pull out the wrong tool and your job becomes much harder to do. The right tool for the right job makes all the difference. That's why we invent these tools. And it's the same with LLMs. You give them different tools that are not well structured, not described well, where the LLM does not know when to use a particular tool. It's going to guess, and you're going to suffer the consequences. So that's why it's important that when you're attaching tools to your LLM, you give them good descriptions. You tell it what parameters it needs to pass in to call your tool. And your tool had better be well structured. You need good safeguards around it. And if you're a software developer hearing this, would be like, wait, this is what I do when I build software. Absolutely. And in some ways, we tell our engineers, please document your code. And you do that because for somebody else who comes and looks at your code, they should be able to understand it. But we don't maybe do a very good job documenting our code as developers. Sometimes we tend to be lazy. I'm speaking for myself. I tend to be very lazy, so my documentation isn't always very good. But when you realize that your consumer is an AI, and it's very unforgiving sometimes because it's going to grab one tool, it's going to do a job, it's going to grab another tool, maybe try to do the same job with it. And like you said, the consequences could be dire. The APIs could be destructive, tear down my database, take a payment, send a message that I shouldn't have sent to a customer. So we're essentially programmed by AI already. Like we're changing our behavior largely because we see the immense power, the immense potential that AI and LLMs unlock for us. So it's been, we've been on a decade-long journey to get engineers and software developers to do better with the software that they write or the APIs that they create, because those APIs become tools. Like, we're welcoming in our AI overlords. We're saying, okay, we're going to do it in service of the AI because the value that you get out of it is massive. Like the potential we're unlocking with that is massive. But you have to be, like, you don't throw out the playbook of what you do to build good software. Good structured code, well-tested code, good guardrails, good authentication, good audit trails. All of those become even more important now because you've got this AI, you mentioned the word agent before, that's essentially autonomous code that's just going to go and work. And sometimes the best analogy is like, imagine you have, a child with a bunch of very powerful tools, your APIs. Would you trust them to just go and grab tools willy-nilly? No, you wouldn't. So that coaching that you would do for another person is the same thing that you would have to do for an LLM. That's why it's also very relatable to me. It's like, you can explain this even to my kids, like I was explaining before. Like, this is why you do it one way and not another. When it doesn't get the outcome that you want, they would get very frustrated. Like, well, you have to explain it a little bit better. Don't be lazy in how you explain and ask what you want out of it. It will respond, but better input gets you better output. So it's been very interesting to sort of see that interaction. And I think a lot of us are just exploring. We're discovering right now.
Yeah, providing so much more context. I call it yapping. Like, I've seen people go and try to one-shot their job. Hey, make
Right.
me a marketing deck for blah, blah, blah. That is
Right.
not a prompt.
Right.
But sit there and talk to it for 20 minutes and give it several paragraphs and tell it all about yourself, and you might be a lot closer to what your ultimate goal is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, is that vibe coding? I mean, I haven't seen a good definition of vibe coding.
Vibe coding, I prefer, and I think that there's folks here at my company in my day job at Microsoft that are calling it specification-driven development, because ultimately, I think that there are some really, really interesting philosophical conversations that people aren't having, where it's like, you need to be really, really specific. Well, you turn up the specificity on English prose, it turns into a programming language that you can
Right.
compile. So if I wanted an abstract syntax tree of my prose, I would just write it in C# or Python.
Right. Right. And I think that's what's irony is the right word here. Is like we're saying, you're not going to program anymore. Like, yeah, you are. You're just programming with a different language, and the level of verbosity, specificity that you need to communicate, the context is so powerful. But we invented programming languages because the abstraction that digital computers give us, like the zeros and ones, is so unlike anything else in nature. And LLMs, in a way, are just like bringing us back to what's real. It's like, I'm going to YOLO it. It's like, I'm going to figure it out. And so to guide it and restrict it and constrain it, you start essentially speaking to it in a particular way. And at what point does it become a programming language?
Yeah. There was a time a couple of years ago where everyone was calling themselves a full stack developer. And, full stack for them might have stopped at JavaScript, right? And it didn't consider process boundaries and threads and all that kind of stuff. And the next guest on this show next week will be Randall Hyde, who wrote one of the very first 6502 assembly language compilers, like in the middle 70s. And the difference between where the business person wants to do their visual low-code workflow builder and where Randall Hyde's brain works is that's the full stack developer. Right. And I think we're all fumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out what's the right way to chain requests, transform data, automate actions at a point that is specific enough that it's deterministic, but also not so specific that it's exhausting.
Yeah, I think you just touched on something very powerful, like the visual aspect of programming that we all do. As engineers, when you're describing something, how often do you reach for a piece of paper or a napkin? You start drawing out boxes and arrows. Because to most extent, I think that's a common way for us to decompose a problem and describe a workflow. And when I was looking at Postman Flows, that's the thing that resonated for me. It's like visual languages have been around for a while. Like, what's different? APIs changed the game quite a bit because Postman, like we said before, all of the world's APIs are on Postman, and increasingly software development today is just compose a bunch of APIs together to get a job done. But in the age of AI, like why can an 11-year-old program and vibe an application? It's because they can visually see that the game do what they wanted and what they intended. Like the buttons are in the right place, the screen is in the right shape. They did a lacrosse game, that's the game they play, and so are the mechanics right? And so when you're talking about full stack development and backend, and I'm not a software developer, right? Because we're seeing the gates are falling. Like anybody could build a full stack application today. How do I know how to maintain this code in the backend? It's not giving me a pile of JavaScript code because I can't reason about it. Don't give me a pile of Python code that I might not even know how to run. I want a visual workflow that matches my mental model for the backend. And to me, that's what's powerful about visual languages like Postman Flows. I vibe coded a full stack application like GUI. The backend is completely done with Postman Flows, but I can visually see, hey, is this doing what I want or not? Is the logical order of do this and that sort of there in place? Do I need to change an edge? Is it faster for me to go and fix something just by tweaking the visual language versus having to interact with the LLM and give it the right context just to tweak small thing? So I think that's what's powerful for me and why we're seeing more and more visual workflow builders today. Almost everybody is sort of realizing the same thing at the same time, which tells you like we're heading into a paradigm shift in terms of how we build software, where you're vibing, you're specifying to the LLM to build your application. And it's a lot more visual than in a traditional sense where you just wrote code for everything.
Yeah. Hey, friends, we're going to take a beat in this episode and pay the bills with our new sponsor, ShareGate by WorkLeap. I've got Shaylin Gimby on the line. Help me understand, as companies are preparing for the end of life of Microsoft SharePoint 2016 and 2019, I know there's someone on the show here who's been listening who's got that version of SharePoint. What's some advice you would give them to prepare for that end of life?
I think the biggest mistake is waiting for leadership to make that call. If you know a migration is coming, start assessing and planning now. When that request finally comes down the pipeline and you know it's going to be really quick, you'll have a game plan ready. That's where ShareGate comes in. Our pre-migration tools help you analyze your environment, map out dependencies, and clean up before the move. The sooner you get ahead of it, the smoother the transition will be. And if you're not sure where to start, talk to our experts. Get a demo and just see how easy ShareGate makes it. The clock is ticking, and the sooner you start, the better prepared you'll be.
The clock is ticking. Check them out at sharegate.com. It's ShareGate by WorkLeap. It's one tool that'll help you migrate faster and secure your tenant out of the box. Microsoft 365 migration, best practices that guide you at every step. And thank you to ShareGate for being a sponsor of Hanselminutes. Check them out, sharegate.com. Now, I want the audience to understand a little bit of context here, and I want to gas you up a little bit, which is a good thing, as the kids say. To be clear, you were a research scientist at MIT. You have worked on compiler optimizations. You have a background in distributed systems. You understand this stuff. And as someone who has thought about it at the, for lack of a better term, the Lex and Yak level of like parsing, you're preferring and finding yourself floating into a visual language now. Is there an AST? Is there a compiler? Or is this just a fundamentally new way of plugging a UI with business logic and text boxes over data into a system? Is it a compiler or is it something entirely new?
Yeah, I haven't heard the words Lex and Yak in a long time, so thanks for bringing me back.
You're welcome.
There is a compiler. Postman Flows is a visual language. It's a visual programming language. There's a compiler underneath that takes that and turns it into a runtime specification. And there's a runtime, a virtual machine that actually can execute that bytecode, if you will. But just like nobody thinks about assembly anymore, unless you're working at that level. Maybe if you're a gaming developer, you're still coding at the assembly level because every microsecond counts. You don't peel the layers of the onion deep enough when you're building software today. It's more... and this is why we're like searching for the right level of abstraction is so powerful. So my ideal state is like you're just building an application. There's a lot of assets generated for you under the covers, and you only need to go and peek in. Maybe you're very curious, but you need to go fix something, and just much easier for you to just go look at the visual workflow, tweak an edge, tweak a variable, tweak a small statement in context, as opposed to having to understand the semantics of JavaScript or Python or whatever is the language that you're using. But you don't want to expose that.
Do you feel that people of a certain age, myself included and others, are pushing back on this paradigm shift that we're in out of a sense of mourning? Like, do you feel like you're throwing away 20 years of experience for another paradigm?
Yeah. So you asked me, I think that's a very good question. When I was building high-level languages for programming hardware, we invented a language very similar to Java called Liquid Metal. And we would compile that down to Verilog, which is the way you program hardware. And it's a level of gates and wires, literally gates and wires. And we would walk into potential customers to do demos for them. And we would show them this high-level program that maybe did high-frequency trading, and we would show them how one click, we're essentially programming the hardware, and up we have customized hardware that can perform better, very low power, very attractive. And they would ask the question, can I look at the generated Verilog so I can change it? And my question was like, why? Why would you ever want that? And that never resonated. And I feel, bring that back to today, and I think we're at the same level. Like if I'm interacting with an LLM and it's generating my application for me, I think, for us people who have been doing this for a while and sort of know how the sausage is made, like you want to look underneath. But for a large class of programmers, like, why? I don't think I ever want to look underneath. So, and I think resisting it is not necessarily, maybe it's job security. I don't think it's nostalgia. I think it's a lack of understanding that your knowledge translates to how you wield this power to make you even much more productive. I think that was the thing for me that was transformational. I'm a developer. I can drop into just about any language out there and just program it and be very proficient. Maybe not every language, but some of the common popular languages. And there was a market shift for me where I stopped doing that. Instead of reaching for VS Code to write my application, I started reaching for Postman Flows. I built full stack applications, do authentication, integration with Stripe, generation of code, agents, etc. All things I could do with JavaScript or run a Lambda or whatever. But it was useful for me, particularly as I was trying to figure out what my idea was, to just lay it out step by step in a visual way. And that was transformational. And I think with generative AI, where you're generating applications, I think that's just the way we're going to develop. Within my team, I've been encouraging, and this is true for all of Postman, we're encouraging all of our engineers to figure out how to embrace AI for themselves, to essentially up-level and upskill themselves. And what's remarkable is that your senior engineers, for example, who know more, know how to wield the power well. Your junior engineers need coaching because they don't know yet what they don't know. And so they might not know what good solutions look like yet. And so you need to make sure that you're training them in the right way so that you can up-level them. Like you're not going to have a team of just full senior engineers all the time or staff engineers. You need to be able to train the people who are already doing it so that they can increasingly wield AI in very productive ways. And Postman is not unique in this. Like there's lots of companies that are trying to figure this out as well. But I think if you're not doing it, you're going to be disrupted completely. Like you're going to be left behind. Somebody's going to figure it out for you, and then it's too late.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out at what level do I want to write my own poetry and enjoy my own haiku, and at what level do I'm like, yeah, this is just 5-paragraph essay. This is prose. I can just generate this garbage. I have been managing the advertisers on the Hanselminutes podcast out of a JSON file that sits in Azure storage, and every time a new sponsor comes in, I open the JSON file and I manually edit it in VS Code. And I've done this for 15 years. And that's insane. However, the problem was not annoying enough for me to write an app. And then I went and I finally vibe coded an app. I've never seen the code for it. It now lives online and I can manage sponsors and advertisers and headshots and stuff. I think it was written in TypeScript, but I've never seen it before. Right. And I think that what happened for me was the problem was like 10 minutes a week. It was irritating. And I was like, I'm not going to dedicate 3 or 4 days of coding to solve a 10-minute problem. But I vibe coded it in 42 minutes.
Right.
And it took longer to get it into the cloud than it did to vibe code. And that was a moment for me. So I think I still want to spend time doing bespoke work, but not boring text boxes over data work.
Yeah. I lots of good nuggets in there to try to unpack. Just because you can doesn't mean you always should. And I think I've seen that again firsthand using this technology. Like, sure, I can have Cursor generate a bunch of code for me or have it debug a test. But it doesn't, I don't want to abdicate the responsibility of actually thinking at some point and solving a problem potentially faster than having the LLM go and try to batch it into submission, essentially. It's just going to take longer. And there are things that just bring us joy. Like you don't want to abdicate that, sort of stop doing it. That's what you enjoy. You should keep doing it. But there's lots of things that are mundane or tedious or that would just take you longer. So here's where you want to guide the AI to help you do your job better. I've been keeping track, like almost every pull request or feature that I fix, in terms of the Postman Flows product. I look at how long it took me to take it from when I open cursor to the pull request is open. And I've been sharing those with the team, again, to sort of encourage them to say, look, some things are just much faster to do. And we can close 150 bugs in a month in terms of input from feedback that we get from our customers, rather than say, this is going to be 3 sprints that are going to take us maybe half a quarter to do. Like, we can do it in a week. In fact, we're doing it right now. And we're building agents to sort of we're building those agents in Postman on Flows to essentially say, we get a feedback ticket from a customer or from our internal users. We build Postman on Postman, so a lot of usage also comes in from our internal user base. Automatically triage it. Can AI just fix this? If it can, open the pull request. And then the expert comes in and judges, is this a good fix or not? And you want to make sure that this is, going back to the original question you're asking, like, tools matter, the specification matters, because you don't want this to become noise for your engineers. And it becomes things that they ignore.
Yeah.
Or they look at it as a waste of time.
Yeah, the thing that is going to be challenging for the junior engineers, for the early in career engineers that will exist, that are exiting university in the middle of this moment, is not just the specification matters, but specificity matters. And the challenge that I'm having as old man who shakes fist at cloud is that, hey, my car is knocking. Hey, my car, like my fridge just died, right? Like I talked to you, but we actually rescheduled this podcast because my fridge died, right? I can just accept that the fridge died, but I know the condenser gave out. Like, at what level are the early in career people going to go like, oh, this Postman flow didn't work. Oh, it's because I didn't understand how to do this. I needed some conditional logic in FQL or in TypeScript. And how many of them will just go, I don't know, buy a new fridge?
Right. Yeah, FQL is Flow's query language, which is a simpler way of programming back when you actually had to write code versus TypeScript that appealed to a different persona that maybe wasn't a typical software developer. Another great question. I wanted to, before, in terms of, this is where iteration with the LLM matters. My son was learning geometry. He had an earlier problem he was doing today. He was like, Dad, I don't know how to solve this. I was like, you have immense power I didn't have when I was growing up. Pull up ChatGPT. Ask it to explain it to you. We sat together and I saw the prompts that he was giving it. It was like, I don't understand this. Give me more examples. And that interaction got him to solve a geometry problem where he figured it out on his own. And I think it's the same thing with figuring out software. This didn't work. How do you specify what didn't work? To what level of detail? And you will get better outcomes because the large language models are remarkable at understanding our language, but you have to give them the right input for them to act. And when you've vibed your application, I think that final step is where, we will lose a lot of people. Like, that's still an impediment that needs to fall. And you see, companies like Replit, for example, trying to solve how you take idea to cloud automatically. And this is also a problem that we've solved with Postman Flows, where you build your visual workflow on the canvas in Postman, you click a button, or you can ask agent mode, which is Postman's embedded agent, to just deploy. And it takes a second. It's basically instantaneous. And your code that you were building in your canvas and running locally is now in the cloud. And this is what Rodric's cloud looks like. And so I hope people try it out, enjoy it, and let us know how it works. But you want to solve that last barrier because you don't want to make it easy to solve the hard problem and then die over the things that are completely mechanizable, whether it's Microsoft's cloud, Amazon's cloud, Google's cloud. They're all hard to use. But I think this is where AI and mechanizing that whole deployment process really can come in and be brought to bear.
So is it running, and is there a container runtime, or how is it able to be moved up into any cloud so easily?
Yeah, it's a serverless runtime. This is, again, using some of the technology I've built in the past where it's isolated, actually runs in WebAssembly, and we can ship it basically to run in any cloud environment.
Oh, WebAssembly. That's another thing. WebAssembly is having its moment. You're taking all of these things that are having their moment, and like serverless and WebAssembly and like knowledge of scale. I've made the joke in the past that I have a 3-page resume, but page 2 was scaling web farms. So I just had to rip page 2 out of the thing because now it's just a checkbox. And I'm sad about that. But at the same time, we're standing on top of this. Why is it so hard to deploy a freaking app
Right.
that is resilient and serverless and stateful?
Right. And I think that was the appeal for serverless for me. Like coming in terms of transition I had where, FPGAs were the hardest things you could use. You couldn't just go buy one. At Best Buy, like GPUs, graphics processors, which really gave, a run in terms of crypto and graphics, gamings, and where we are today. But they're really hard to use, still remain niche. And where you are today with serverless, like I didn't have to think about the hardware. Like we were trying to explain to people, your code will run faster, it's low power. Great. I don't really care about the underlying mechanism. And that was the aha moment for me. Is like, it scales automatically. I don't have to do anything. That's great. Sign me up. I pay for what I use and nothing else. Sign me up. So I think that's what shifted things for me. And this is where we are today. It's a confluence of so many things, from APIs to visual workflow languages to distributed systems, the immense power we have with LLMs, all coming together. And I think the future is very exciting. Like if I'm young and growing up here, it's a very exciting time.
I just think it's really cool that someone with your background that worked in FPGAs is now building a tool for running AI agents and API automations. Like, I think that's just, I don't know, somehow I respect it even more. You're like, I know how the thing works, but I'm choosing not to, and I'm going to work at this layer of abstraction because I want to get cool work done that helps people. And I think that's really great.
Yeah, it's like stay hungry, stay learning. Like, especially for us, like technology changes. Especially with AI, I have never seen things change this rapidly. And what does the future look like? I have a kid who will be entering college in a few years. You want to give them the right tools to think through critical thinking, know how to problem solve, how to decompose large problems, and then set them out into the future. It's going to look very different than what I grew up in, what you grew up in. And the technology, I think, is just transforming in so powerful ways. But that's what's exciting about technology. It's like, why would you want any other job? Like, if you're a grad student or you're entering college, absolutely learn this stuff. Your job is going to be secure. You just have to figure out how to wield all of this immense power.
Absolutely true. Well, thank you so much, Roderick Rabah, for chatting with me today. Roderick is the head of product, Postman Flows. You can check them out at postman.com. And this has been another episode of Hanselminutes, and we'll see you again next week.